Yeah. So we are looking now on co-evidence. This is the link for our review or even idiopathic arthritis. And so we are here in the last step in co-evidence actually, so the extraction. So we have these 23 studies. So we click here as a, okay. And then here in co-evidence, we have it's possible to order in different ways by author, title. I think it's good to keep it as by author, so we have the same order, we follow the same order. So please, when you use co-evidence, please double check that we have the same order. So it's alphabetical order by the name of the author. So Alex Save in this case is the first one here. And the work that is done with the merging, for example, there are these two publications for the same children. So for this reason, this is one study, two publications, but two. So the work here about the risk of bias is the risk of bias for this study, which consists of two PDFs. So we have to click on the view full text and then to give one judgment for both PDFs, because it's one study for us. So the unit of analysis is the study. And everything needs to be done by two people independently, and co-evidence works very nicely to this purpose. So this case was Michele and Lene starting this. And this is done, so the consensus seems to be already done. It's possible to take over with this button, manage reviewers. So someone else, for example, that it's possible to like this. I don't know that it's now Giovanni doing this and not Michele. I'm supposed to transfer, but now it's not necessary. So I will just cancel. But it's possible also to change this setting afterwards. Any questions so far?
But if you change the reviewer, then
yeah,
it's going to be recorded in the system, so that.
So if you change the reviewer, for example, if you put Giovanni instead of Michele here, you see there are two options. So if you click on this one, all work done before is cancelled. So you do this only if you think that the old work was wrong, for example. Otherwise, usually it's better to do like this, so you can keep the work done by the previous person, and then you can edit if needed. So when we do this, usually we click on this first option, and then click Save here, and then you take over.
But I mean that everything we do will be recorded in the history of our job.
So history, you mean this one, view history? Yeah. I need to check this, Michele. I'm not sure this is, so here are all the steps when these were imported here. So 1 year ago, Carsten and Flavio voted yes at the alpha screening. So 2 years went to the full text review. And here the PDF was added on September last year by Carsten. And then again, Carsten and Flavio voted yes, was included. And then Michele merged in October last year. Risk of bias started 2 months ago by Michele, and then completed by Michele on the same day. And then Michele started to do extraction. Let's continue, it's a long history. And then Michele assigned Lene to do the same. And then on 19th of July, Lene did this.
So even when the reviewers are changed, then it's in the history.
Yeah. So it was done. Yeah. So we have the full track of these changes, but we of these actions. But it's not recording what was written. So if you wrote low, high, so it is changed. We don't know the details. We just know the date and who did what. That's it. Okay, so.
I have one question, because some of these studies, as you told us, there was maybe an abstract and then later a published paper, and we have to view it as one paper and then look at the highest quality among these informations, or can there be any problems when there are different ways to describe the study? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, and yes, it's a good question. It's very important, especially for one of the items when we compare if the outcomes specified in the protocol are the same in the final publication. Because so this is about reporting bias. So it's one of the issues here that we need to assess. So if I click here, if I scroll down, so it is this topic. So here at selecting outcome report is what we do. If available, we compare the outcome specified, for example, in the protocol that you mentioned and the final publication. We are happy we give low risk of bias if the protocol is available and we compare and there are no discrepancies between what is stated in the protocol and what they wrote in the final publication. That's when we give. But we need to check that the protocol, for example, was registered before patient enrollment, because sometimes they do retrospectively. They do the study in 2010, and then 1 year after they register the protocol. And this is make no sense. So in that case, we should still give unclear risk of bias, because if the protocol is done after the study, then it's like it's not valid for us. So we need to check also the date, and we need to check. So there might be some outcomes, for example, that are specified in the protocol and not in the final report. And then in that case, we are not happy. So we should put here in this selected outcome reporting. But it might be also vice versa, that one outcome is not present in the protocol, then it's popping up at the end of the final publication. So we are worried that the researchers, the clinicians want to highlight some benefits or harms of the intervention, so that they cherry pick and they select a posteriori whatever they want, maybe to report what is significant statistically and so on. And so it's important, to answer your question, Elena, it's important to compare what is reported in the multiple publication referring to the same study. And this one about selective outcome reporting probably is the most important example. But it might be, for example, here other bias we might write we should write, for example, if there is a funding, for example, that the study was sponsored by the company or the pharma selling this drug. And then we know well that this might largely influence the results. So if there are that the study was funded by Pfizer, then we have to report here and to put at least unclear and to report this. And we need to check this in all publications. So if I go back here to the main page for this study, we will look at Brunner now, 5 publications. It might be that just in one of the 5 PDF, they write that Pfizer was paying the study, for example. So that's why we need to check, unfortunately for us, because it takes some time, but we need to check each of them. And here it's easy because this is not clinicaltrials.gov, so it's just the registration of the trial. So we don't have a full text, but we need to go here and to do like this, up to here, to do copy and to paste in a new tab, and then to read what is written there. So it's not a PDF, but we need to check what they wrote there. And here also it's a protocol. This might be also the same, exactly the same text. Also the title is identical. And then I scroll down and we have a publication of 9 pages here. This was seems to be just 1 page. This might be just an abstract. I don't know. You should check there and check. And this is 2-page document. And yeah, this seems to be a conference abstract. But yeah, but then we need to open each of them. And so in this case, 5 records, but to give one here, to give just one evaluation. One from Michele, one from Lene, or from Lene, from Ingmar, whoever, but it's one evaluation for the study. So the unit of analysis is the study.
Okay.
And yeah, about the items, the domains of the risk of bias, do you have any questions? First, there are 2 questions about the randomization. Then that is about the blinding during the procedure and when you assess the outcomes. Then we have the attrition bias, and the reporting bias, and the other bias. These are is a standard Cochrane risk of bias tool. Shall we look at this? Shall we give a look so we can refresh?
Please. Yeah.
And so I go back to this same study. Usually these 2 maybe are the easiest. The first book, so sequence generation. So here the question is, so in this area we could only randomize trials. So it's important to see, was this properly randomized or not. So here the question sequence generation, if it is the sequence of random numbers, how was generated, how was created. So we are happy if we are sure that was a real random sequence of numbers. So, and there are actually two ways how to do proper randomization. Usually, and especially in the last decades, it's generated by the computer. So you should write computer generated or with a software, with an online tool that details how this random sequence of numbers was generated. Or option number two, visible from a couple of decades ago, was from papers, like it's called the tables of random numbers. Nowadays no one is doing, but if we include all the stuff, we might find that. So we need to be sure to give low risk of bias that they specified somehow in the role in the methods how the sequence of these random numbers was generated. And we give low only if they write here in the article, we want to go to publication or fact. If we specify this.
Do we have to write down here to give some argument why we say there's a low risk of bias, or is it okay? Do we have to say we have to give the argument because
yes,
to add that?
We always for all these domains we always need to give to comment. So the comment is more important than the color.
Okay.
Because we need to explain, because other people might disagree. They might be more severe and rigorous than us, or might be more flexible and comprehensive, or that they say, okay, for me this is low. Doesn't matter. There is some subjectivity. Also for myself, when I do this, also after doing a few reviews, I still feel sometimes unsure. Should be low or unclear, or should be unclear or high. But so what is the most important to explain why we are concerned, if we are concerned. And here in Coevidence, what is nice, it is possible to, if you click here, you go to the PDF, and okay, this is not the best document. If I click here on show all references, you see in this Bruno 2014, we have the 5 studies included. I think this one might be the main publication. Let's see if it's loading page 1 now. And yes, here we go. And here they state also the title is randomized with a British spelling. And so if it is me doing this, I go directly to the methods and I search, okay, here they say randomized, but I want to see how it was randomized. Do they specify yes or not? And if I find a sentence, they can help me. I select it, and let's I try to zoom in. And let's have a look together. This is an example. So part 1 of the study.
Randomized.
Yeah. Patient randomized assigned a double reminder. This one, right? Randomization algorithm was done via interactive voice response system investigation. So yeah, they specify quite well that how it was generated was definitely by computer. So if we are here, one nice option from Coevidence is that you can select text and then automatically we'll go there. But before we do that, it's important to, because now we'll be very quick. You speak about part 1 and part 2. So which part of the study we're going to include? Part 1, part 2, or both? Because might be that the part 1, part 2, maybe only one of them matches the inclusion criteria of our Cochrane review. So let's have a look at part 1 first. For the 16 open label lead-in period, which all patients receive golimumab. And then at week 16, patient entered the double-blind withdrawal period, which is part 2. And then in part 2, randomization was to either placebo or to continue golimumab. So I think it is fine. So because for us, the most relevant part is part 2, when actually the patient, the children are randomized to our drug to placebo, right? So it's important this information before. So we are happy. So what we might do here, for example, I select like this, I wait a second, and then Corinne is asking me, okay, why are you selecting this? Where do you want to send this? I want to send to sequence generation, and then I click save. Let's see if this is done. And I go back, I click this button. Okay, this test is done. Was you, Lena, doing this, or it is me now?
Yeah, it was Lena.
Okay, very good. So Lena, you already know this function.
Yeah.
About, yeah, very good. And it is convenient because you save time, and sometimes it's good to do like this. Sometimes we can just do like Michele to summarize, and both are correct. It just might be good to agree now, we're still at the beginning, to be homogeneous, to be consistent across the review, to have a similar approach, so that we have the same attitude how to do this. So what means some people, okay, if possible, we use the quote, and if it is not quote, then we write something. And the people say, no, I don't like the quote, it's too long, too much space. I want always to summarize like in here. Both are correct, but I think it's important to decide, the two of you and Ikema, so because we save time, because at the end, the first step is now two people independent to do this. But then there's also the job at the end to do the consensus. So we can select either this or this, right? So it is that's why we save time if we take a decision on how to proceed on this.
So, but both the solutions are okay. Either
yes.
to make a short comment or to quote the old sentences from the text. Great.
Yeah. And so if I go back here, I mean, this is many people, they like to use coding like this. So look at the PDF, and then when they find a sentence for now it was about randomization, that might be the same. And then for the other items, then they select, they go there. Other people, they prefer to do it in other ways. They open separately the PDF outside coevidence, and then they can search more quickly with the control find. For example, they search keywords like randomization, blind, protocol, ethical, approved, funded, gift. So all these keywords that are important for the scope bias. So both, I mean, it's up to you. You can decide what you prefer. You can try both, or so this was the first item. So sequence generation. The second one is allocation concealment. So we are still thinking about doing a proper study, so that we need a re-randomization, and those allocation concealment means that the research, the clinicians, the nurses involved in the study, they are not aware about what patient, what will happen with the next patient. So it's important that this is concealed, so it's like hidden. And this type of system, so like described here, gives a low risk of bias because it's done by the computer, and there's an algorithm, and then it's given via interactive voice response. So I think we might be happier and give a low risk of bias also for the second domain. Yeah, and you did the low risk of bias. Yeah, and in this case, for item number 1, sequence generation, and 2, allocation concealment, it is fine that you have the same quote or the same explanation. Yeah, it's because that we are using the traditional Koch risk of bias tool. In the new one, it's called 2.0. These two are being merged in one domain, because people say, okay, but it's not that story. But they just to explain that these are strictly connected, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Then we have a free blinding of participant personnel, so of the children with disease and doctors and nurses involved in the study, and then of those assess the outcome. So 2 separate outcomes. This is performance bias, this is detection bias, and I think this is quite easy to understand, and it's a pharmacological study, so it should be easy to blind the drug. So to make it also the appearance that the nurse, doctor look at is a vial, and they don't understand if it is a placebo. So because sometimes it's not possible to compare, for example, doing a surgery 3 times a day, 1 time a day, you cannot have a blinding, right? But here there are no excuses; there should be a blinding. So let's see. Let's look at here. So Lena used the quote. And week 16 is part 2, which is the most relevant, because and so both of you are happy, low, and yeah, I agree if there are these sentences there. And
yeah,
here
I have a question here about the, because in the explanation of the item, it says that whether the intended blinding was effective or not. And it is a detail that is not specified in so many studies. So is it something that we have to point out in our comments, or if it's just
yeah, I think that is this is rarely an issue, but I think it's important to keep in the mind, because it might be that when looking, for example, I don't know, there's a table 1 with baseline characteristics, which is something went wrong, or that in the results they wrote that I don't know, the randomized 100 patients, but then for I don't know, for 20 of them actually the blinding was broken, so the doctors and nurses were aware if they were given the drug. And this might be because, for example, it's not this case with this drug. My father drug might be that the drug is given a special taste in the mouth, and then the blinding is broken, both for the patient and for the carers, for the caregivers.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I have to leave now. It's really a pity because I learn a lot here, but I look forward to hear the presentation afterwards, the recorded one. So thank you. So thank you very much, Michelle and Matteo, for all your help and collaboration. So we must keep in touch, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Okay, so we can continue in English, right? Because we continue to record, right?
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah. And Ingvar will be happy if I could speak in Swedish, but let's keep it in English. And okay.
Well, because I want to ask as well about because it says here if it's for all outcomes. And of course, we don't know whether the intended blinding was effective for all the outcomes or not. But we can keep it as a low risk of bias anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for all outcomes is more relevant here for this one, for the next one. Here it's written like this also because it's possible here in co-evidence to split some of these items, for example, for objective and subjective outcomes.
Yeah.
So for example, mortality is objective and the pain scale is subjective. But yeah, we can ignore this part here. And also this, I think it's good to keep the information in the mind, but if we don't find anything, it's fine to give low. And probably the first part of the sentence, this one is enough here. This one or the quote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then number 4 is a detection bias. So assessing the outcome of the patients. And we have for all outcomes here. And so let's see. So the quote from Lene was, situation to the all patient, serious infection when defined according to definition. Okay, this is I mean, it's important information, but not referring to this domain, because here we're assessing how the outcomes were. So if those people assess the outcome, if they're aware or not, if the child got the drug or the placebo. Yeah, so I would vote for this part of the sentence here. We can skip the second part, and yeah, this one, this one is relevant for here for the next one, which is attrition bias. Okay, but this is okay. I will find low if they are blinded, as you wrote here. And then we have number 5. So we have attrition bias. So here we see if outcome data are reported for all children. So the number of infants is 173 or 73. But in any case, it means 2 out of 73 still is very low, so we are not concerned because it's acceptable to have this dropout of 2 out of 73, which is something like 3%, is very low. We might accept even 10% without any worries. So what we need to check here is if too many children dropped out, so in terms of absolute number, percentage of the total randomized children. And then question number 2, if there is a unbalance between this dropout rate in drug group and placebo group. Because let's say that 0 dropout in the control group and 10% or more dropout in the drug group, then we should give high risk of bias, because it might be that the drug was given side effects, or nausea or headache, and they were stopping. So it's important to highlight this. Yeah, so it's good if they report the cause why these children were excluded. I don't know, the child moved to Spain, or if the parents opted out for the consensus. So it's good when they report in the paper reasons why these children went away, why the children dropped out, and
so
yeah.
we should comment about whether they are reported, whether the numbers are reported, and whether the reasons are reported.
Yes, so it might be I don't know, few dropout rate, few children dropped out, or might be put a number so people can also see the numbers, and the reasons for dropout are reported. Yeah, 2 sentences are enough here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we are number 6 is this selective auto-reporting, so selection bias. So this is what I was mentioning at the beginning. So comparing what is in the protocol and what is in the final publication. And like in this case, it's 5 publications, so we should check the 5 publications to see if there are discrepancies. And the one example, of course, about outcomes, but might be also, I don't know, in the protocol they wrote that was 3 groups, but they to 3 groups like drug high dose, drug low dose, and placebo. And then the final study there are just 2 groups. It would be strange. So in that case, it should be high risk of bias. So any discrepancy between what was specified before the study and what was actually done. And if the protocol is not available, then we should put unclear.
Okay.
If it is if there are discrepancies, important discrepancy, then we give high. If there is very mild discrepancy, we give unclear. If there is perfect, we give low risk of bias. And for example, if we take these comments here are comments, and here yeah, this is a point by the review authors. The clinical effect of biological DMARDs often exceeds their pharmacological half-life. Yeah, here, I mean, it's a bit long. We don't need all this information because not everything here refers to this item. So I think it's good to try to be short. And so here we should really focus on if there are discrepancy between the protocol and the final study. And then here,
the discrepancy here was that the study was not terminated, was terminated in advance by the sponsor, as the primary endpoint was not met. So is it relevant to report, or should we only focus on the discrepancy between the protocol and the outcome reports?
I think it's worth it to mention this, but this perhaps might be moved here to the last one, to other sources of bias. And however, it was you, Michele, right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you wrote that the study was made after the double-blinded phase of the study, right? Because our review includes, this review includes only when the children are still in the randomized part, right?
Yeah.
They're still so in this case, that's the first 16 weeks. So this is not so it's fine to report it, but still it's kind of low risk of bias. So it might be good to report this, but actually I would do this here.
Yeah.
So and here we just focus on this papers between protocol and the final publication of them. Yeah, and this is correctly done. So this is high risk of bias and so on. Yeah. So here, might be when there's a clear funding, we report this and we put it there. And might be sometimes that some people they write heroes about not only money but also about the declaration of interest. So in the study published in the last year, it is always it's compulsory. This is all papers. But for study a bit older, this might not be there. So we might perhaps put unclear risk of bias if it's not declaration of interest. Otherwise, if there are no concern, we put the low risk of bias, green color, and then we just write none, just 4 letters, none, to say that there are no problems.
Well, because we had a discussion about it during the previous meeting with Ingemar and Lene, because maybe it's a different source of bias if the study only is sponsored by pharmaceutical companies compared to studies where the main authors are maybe employed in the pharmaceutical company.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to calibrate our judgment, our assessment, maybe we should look at further details about the role played by the pharmaceutical company in the study. If it's only economical support or if it's also intellectual support with assessment of data and writing the papers and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is possible. Is also ambitious to do that, and might take some extra effort. But if all of you agree to do this, I think it might be a good idea. It's the most important is to be consistent, so that if we do that, then we have the same approach for all including studies. So that, because otherwise you might get critiques, right? If you are especially on these topics, this might create more trouble than blind randomization, right? Because people might feel judged. And so for me, it's fine as approach if we are all consistent in this evaluation.
We had also another question about this item, other sources of bias. Do you usually include something else in this item?
Quite often.
It's important to think about, to look at.
It might be something that we think is wrong. For example, in the methodology. How the children were enrolled, if they were where the inclusion exclusion criteria, anything that make us worry, or might be, for example, the study is randomized, but then we look at table 1 basic characteristics and we see that I don't know that in one of the two groups, say in the placebo group, the patients were much younger, or the severity of the arthritis was much higher. This kind of imbalance in the groups, might be different example, but we should not get crazy if in reading 10 times the PDF searching for something. So if you read it, we're not concerned. We just put none, green color, we write none. So actually, quite often this domain is empty. Empty, just writing none. Yeah.
Do you think that the sign of the study with withdrawal randomized trial could be considered a source of bias?
Can you explain again? So the fact that
the fact that, for instance, in this study, the children got the drug altogether, and then they have been during the part 1. All patients received subcutaneous golimumab, and then only those who had at least a 30% improvement moved on to the randomized part. So it's a sort of
yeah. This is a question that for me it's more difficult to answer, because I know too little about the clinical context here. So if you and the others as rheumatology, if you think it is accurate, that it makes sense that for this type of drug that you somehow select the population according to the response in part 1. So if it's something clinically appropriate, then we're not concerned with risk of bias. Otherwise, if you think this makes no sense, or this might have introduced a strong issue in terms of risk of bias, then you should flag it. And yes, you might do that definitely another risk of bias in the section of the other bias of the last one.
Because it's sort of a selection bias, I guess. I mean, because you select only the responders, but it is a correct study design to look at the outcomes that we are interested in. But
yeah,
at the beginning you select only the responders.
Yes, when there will be in the future, there will be another step, which will be when we are done with this bias, extracted the outcomes, then we need to decide, okay, we have 10 included studies. Does it make sense, for example, to combine the same analysis, so to pull together this study, Bruno 2014, with another study where this part 1 was not done? So it's about comparing the characteristics of the two populations. Yeah. So rather than a selection bias, it's different inclusion criteria in the trials and different way to include children. So these are different characteristics. So if you, Ingemar, Giovanni, as Lena, you think with your experience in rheumatology, you say these populations are so different, both studies are included, perhaps both are fine for risk of bias, so we keep a low risk of bias, but make no sense to pull them together, because to put together oranges and apples because of this part 1. So both are included but not analyzed together. So maybe there are 10 studies included total, and there are 3 studies like Brunner with this part 1 and with this selection, and we pull these 3 together. And there are other 7 studies, this part 1, and then we pull them separately, the 7 studies separately. So this is what. So it's important to consider this with a clinical eye, and then. But we're not concerned so much here for the risk of bias, but later on when we decide how to pull the studies together, if to pull them together, yes or no. Yeah.
So it's not so relevant to include it in the quality assessment at the moment.
Yeah, that's correct. It's important in the other part when we write the characteristics of the study. So it's kind of PICO to report this. Yes, it's important, because then we need to make it right when we start to pull the studies together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And here with risk of bias, so when this is done, that is a consensus, then this is done in co-evidence. With sometimes there is maybe the temptation here to write something like I don't know, maybe we read the name of very famous and well-known, appreciated dermatologist, so we might write something positive about publishing it on the Lancet. But we should not do that. So we should just follow the methodology of the Cox bias tool, and to say these are 7 items, 6 plus number 7 is other biases. Just to, it's also easier. It's more objective, and yeah.
But do you think that we could continue working like that, or is there anything wrong that we should change?
But when I think we look just at this study, Bruin 2014, and it is a quick zoom, and we just look at one of the 5 publications. And this is probably the main publication, Bruin 2014. So I think it's good to start from here. So, for example, I did not look. I just trusted what you guys did, and it is fine like this, of course. And about randomization, I think it was fine. Just to have a look together again. And some comments were correct, but in my opinion, in the wrong place. So what I said before, here should be more down and so on. But if you are all aware of this, I think, Michele, I think it will be fine to continue. Might be good that also Lena Ingemar, if you have time to look at this 40 minutes video and then see if they agree. Might be that my comments were unclear. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss again either by email or via Zoom.
Okay. So just to summarize, the most important thing is to comment for all the items. It's not, the comment is much more important than the high, low, or unclear.
Yeah.
And you can either write your own comments, or you can quote what is written in the paper.
Yeah.
You have to make an assessment of all the papers related to the same study, not only the main one.
Yeah.
And to try to give a cumulative assessment of all the papers related to the study. And concerning the pharmaceutical companies, should we decide whether to make a difference related to the bigger or lesser involvement of the pharmaceutical company? Otherwise, it's better to be consistent with to consider as a high risk of bias for all the sponsored studies, no matter what the pharmaceutical company have been doing.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Yeah.
Anything else we should point
out? I think no, that's it about the risk of bias. And
okay. So we can stop the registration, the recording now, and Lena and Ingemar are welcome to contact Matteo for further questions about it. Okay.
Yeah.